When the mighty Apollo threatens the Earth with destruction, Athena summons the mighty guardians of the cosmos to defend the planet from danger. Now you can bring this Saturday morning action to life. Zack, Quinn, Jake, Max, and Clint fight together as one, with Zack striking Apollo with his powerful Pegasus meteor punch. Wield the power of Max's Nebula chain. Collect all 5 epic heroes. Who will save Earth? Guardians of the Cosmo dolls and accessories, each sold separately. Only from Bandai.
The last time you saw me, I was caught in a pretty bizarre moment of serendipity. I was sitting at the edge of my bed in awe of a new discovery I never in a million years could have expected. Just when I had given up hope on my investigation in finding the lost live-action StarStorm pilot, a new piece of media had emerged seemingly out of nowhere. Some months ago, I had been granted permission from Renaissance Atlantic CEO Frank Ward to withdraw any and all material from the Library of Congress that related to my previous investigation on Sailor Moon. And by some chance, assuming it was related to Sailor Moon based on its title, one of these files I had requested turned out to be a lost animated pilot of a completely different series. I unearthed a secondary fully animated spin-off of Saint Seiya known as Guardians of the Cosmos, created in 1993, just a year before the rumored live-action StarStorm pilot. This finding raised so many new questions. I took this as a sign to not only keep searching for StarStorm, but to also investigate the full history of this recently discovered hidden gem, and learn exactly how both programs ended up being forgotten by the general public. Perhaps taking on this new adventure would lead to the complete full circle moment I'd been yearning for, and the answers to one will undoubtedly connect me to the other. At this point, anything was possible. Exactly how many iterations of Saint Seiya did Renaissance Atlantic attempt before they threw in the towel? My mind was filled with so many what-ifs, and I grew more eager about this project with every passing moment. I needed to know more. So that's exactly what I set out to do in today's piece. On tonight's episode of Tales of the Lost, I ventured deeper into this lost media labyrinth using this newly acquired video that landed in my lap. I was no longer just looking for the live-action StarStorm pilot, but I was now seeking answers behind the inception of another Americanized Saint Seiya concept titled Guardians of the Cosmos. What exactly made this series so different to its Japanese counterpart? What was the goal of these adaptations, and ultimately, what led them both to fail before reaching North American audiences? With a pilot episode in hand and a hearty list of leads to investigate, was I able to uncover the truth about these 2 rejected adaptations? Or did my sources lead me on another wild goose chase, only to vanish as I inch towards a new breakthrough? Find out how this story unfolds in part 2 of the Secret Stories of Saint Seiya. was astounded to learn that Saint Seiya had undergone multiple attempts at Americanization prior to the release of its poorly received dub. And I know I'm not alone in this shock, as I had received many comments from viewers voicing their own confusion at the reveal of this secondary pilot, which premiered at the cliffhanger of our last episode. It's crazy to think of how much licensed material from Toei and Bandai were on the table to have possibly had their own adaptations. And even crazier to think of a universe where all of these ideas would have been given a green light for syndication. As I've said before, a change like this could have drastically altered the landscape of anime in North America, and could have had the potential at shifting the timeline of when traditional Japanese anime had blown up into our mainstream market. But how does this recent discovery aid in our quest to understand StarStorm? Unfortunately, it's tough to tell how comparable, if anything, it was to Guardians of the Cosmos from a less than 30-second trailer. I even wondered if at some point, like Saban Moon being an animated and live-action hybrid, maybe these two projects were once one. Nevertheless, I hoped that whatever new information I would learn about Guardians of the Cosmos would eventually aid in furthering my StarStorm investigation. I had so many hypotheses racing through my head, and with such a limited amount of evidence to go off of. Whatever the case was, I decided to put any inquiries regarding StarStorm on hold, as I now had something rather special sitting firmly in my lap. My focus would now be fixed on everything Guardians of the Cosmos related for the next couple of weeks. So there I sat in the midst of a new adventure, doing a deeper examination of the contents found inside of the mysterious envelope. I was surprised to discover that in addition to the CD containing the intro and pilot episode, a complete photocopy of the original VHS tape had been sent from the Library of Congress, along with a single page known as a description of contents that provided a brief synopsis of the lost episode. Guardians of the Cosmos, episode entitled Genesis. Separate description of contents. Episode for an animated television series in approximately 23 minutes running time. Copyright 1993 Renaissance Atlantic Entertainment. Film edited by Peter Greaves. Original theme by Dennis C. Brown and Maxine Sellers. Mystical martial arts heroes must battle the forces of evil. In the first episode, entitled Genesis, the Guardians meet their mysterious benefactor Nova, who was paid for their special training. Nova, a beautiful woman, says she needs the Guardians to protect herself as well as the Earth. She explains that she is really Athena from Mount Olympus. Her brother Apollo plans on using his 12 golden warriors to destroy the world because he is displeased with what people have done to the Earth. Athena warns the Guardians that they can only succeed against Apollo's forces by working together. Apollo has, unknown to the Guardians, followed them to Nova/Athena's hiding place. Apollo immediately dispatches a single golden warrior who kidnaps Athena, bringing her back to Mount Olympus. The golden warriors follow, saving Athena and taking her back. Apollo vows to get revenge. Now, I won't get into the specifics as I don't want to spoil the pilot episode in its entirety, but for the sake of my investigation, it's imperative that I at least cover some of what I had seen. After watching the pilot episode, I was pretty stunned at what I had witnessed. It was slightly different from the feeling I experienced when watching the Toon Maker Sailor Moon iteration. It was interesting that rather than being a hybrid animation like Saban Moon, they instead opted to do a complete reimagination of the Japanese anime, similar to Americanized cartoons like Darkstalkers, Street Fighter, and Super Mario. This was a somewhat popular trend in the late 80s to early 90s as an attempt at making anime more palpable for North American audiences. Though anime had already planted its roots firmly in US soil decades before, there was still a long-standing misconception that American children wouldn't respond well to the anime aesthetic, until of course this perception had been thwarted by the ever-present anime boom of the mid to late 90s. This Americanization of anime was a short-lived trend as it proved to be more fruitful for distributors to just dub the anime outright. And to be completely honest, after sitting on it for some time, I didn't exactly hate what I saw. I know this might sound shocking, but if you manage to separate it from Saint Seiya and see it as its own unique series, it actually wasn't that bad. I went into it expecting something of a much lesser quality and was pleasantly surprised at the level of production and their attempt at making the show into something new. It was leaps ahead of previous Renaissance Atlantic projects animation-wise, and while the script could have used a bit of polishing, the writing was on the same level as some of your typical Saturday morning cartoons of the 80s. If you showed me this as a child, chances were that I probably would have enjoyed it as a series. And even more of a controversial statement, but I think if I had to pick between growing up with Guardians of the Cosmos versus the original Deke dub of Knights of the Zodiac, I probably would have picked the former. Yeah, crazy, right? It overall felt like the production team had attempted to take the concept of Saint Seiya and packaged it into a formula that worked better for a younger demographic, whereas the Knights of the Zodiac dub was unfortunately nothing more than a sad butchering of a much more complex and beloved series. What they did here with the resources they were given was actually pretty impressive. So how was it that they did such a better job than the subsequent dubs, and why was it that the pilot never made it to light? Before I could move forward, I needed to have all of my facts about the series lined up. If I wanted to gain more insight on the origins of this pilot, it was integral that I looked at this series a little below the surface. First and foremost, I wanted to give myself a generous amount of time to assess the pilot episode and see if I could spot anything from recognizable voice actors to familiar cast and crew, as that information would be the most crucial in getting any further intel on Guardians of the Cosmos. Also, I thought it would be necessary to outline the key differences in this adaptation that made it diverge so much from the original series. If I could highlight where the similarities end, I might be able to reuse this information for my investigation on StarStorm. Sort of how early concepts in Saban Moon were recycled back into the Deke dub of Sailor Moon, it was entirely within the realms of possibility that whatever unique ideas that were used in Guardians of the Cosmos could have potentially been reused for the live-action StarStorm pilot that came out a year later. So I sat at my desk, set the video on repeat, and plunged headfirst into my deep dive analysis. That night, I spent a few hours watching the pilot episode over and over, taking notes as I went along. I managed to jot down some key pieces of information that stood out, facts that warranted their own analysis, and details that, if investigated, could possibly lead me to learning more about the inner workings behind Guardians of the Cosmos. Firstly, I wanted to take a moment to analyze the theme song itself. As mentioned previously, I noted that the theme song had a catchy and upbeat 80s feel to it, somewhat reminiscent of a jingle you'd hear on Saturday morning cartoons like Captain Planet or G.I. Joe. As it turns out, the tune had been made by American film and television composer Dennis C. Brown and musical artist Maxine Sellers. Dennis C. Brown's work, more notably, was widely recognized in other children's television programming, and he's credited for composing the iconic soundtrack to the 1987 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated TV series. Diving a little deeper into the episode itself, I noticed elements in the story and plot of Guardians of the Cosmos that differed greatly from the series' Japanese counterpart. Like I had mentioned in the pilot outline, there was a bit of an odd environmentalist motif present in the series. The Guardians of the Cosmos are sworn to protect their benefactor Nova, the reincarnation of the goddess Athena, from the evil forces of her brother Apollo and his 12 golden warriors sent to destroy the Earth. Apollo's motive to destroy the Earth is, simply put, because he hates what the humans have done with it. He makes it his mission to destroy humanity as we know it. Contrasting to the anime, in Saint Seiya there's still 5 main bronze saints who protect Sayori, the reincarnation of the Greek goddess Athena, except her battle is against Hades and the Olympian gods. More specifically, in the first arc, the main villain is Pope Ares, an evil gold saint who seeks to overthrow Athena, and successfully manages to trick the silver saints and gold saints into believing that Sayori is not Athena's true reincarnation, and therefore must be destroyed. While more of a minute detail, I noticed in this version the Guardians are all strangers to one another. However, in Saint Seiya, the Bronze Saints had all grown up with one another before being separated at a young age to begin their specialized training. It's apparent that in this Americanized version, none of these characters share any history, and that the characters meant to represent Shun and Ikki are apparently no longer related. In addition to this complete story revision, we also see the reappearance of familiar characters from the anime, now with completely different names, personalities, and even special abilities. Going down the list of Bronze Saints, Dragon Shiryu is now known as Clint. In the pilot, we're introduced to Clint training on the Great Wall under the guidance of his master, Libra Doko. While his name was not revealed in the Americanized version, visually the character is almost identical to his anime counterpart, with the exception of him now having a normal skin tone. Clint's special ability in this series is the Rising Dragon. Andromeda Shun is now known as Max. Shun trained at Andromeda Island in Saint Seiya, but we can't tell where he was sent for his training in Guardians of the Cosmos. All we know is that Max is introduced to his audience training inside inside of a temple. The master he trains with is also nameless, and his special ability is called Chain of Andromeda. Phoenix Iki is now known as Quinn. His character is introduced in a metropolitan area, and he can be seen stopping a woman and her child from being mugged. His master is also not given a name, and his special ability is Fist of Fire. Swan Hyoga is now called Jake, and his character appears to be training in Russia with an unknown master. His special attack is called Diamond Dust. The last of the Bronze Saints and our main protagonist, Pegasus Seiya, is now the hero known as Zack. He appears to be training in the ruins of Greece with Eagle Marin, his teacher from in the anime, who goes unnamed in this Western pilot. Zack's special ability is the Pegasus Meteor. Sayori also appears in the pilot as the character Nova, and consistent with the anime, she is also the reincarnation of the goddess Athena. She is also aided by her butler, Tokumaru Tatsumi, though his name is never mentioned in the American adaptation. In this version, Nova's mansion holds a secret portal to Mount Olympus. Apollo, the main antagonist and brother to Athena, looks nothing like his counterpart in the Japanese anime. Aside from the obvious physical differences, not much is known about his character, but we do know that Taurus Aldebaran, one of the strongest gold saints, acts as his right-hand henchman. In Guardians of the Cosmos, Aldebaran is known as Ram. From what I was able to gather from the audio, I was also surprised to learn that an overwhelming majority of voices heard in the pilot were somewhat recognizable from my childhood. While I couldn't quite pin down each voice actor at the top of my head, I was undoubtedly sure that Jim Cummings had provided the voice work for Iki, Taurus, and Tatsumi.
Look, if it's not too much trouble, we'd kind of like to know why. As you command, Apollo. Just go inside. You will find what you're looking for.
And if my guess is correct, Apollo himself might have been voiced by legendary actor and voiceover artist Tim Curry.
Go down to the earth and bring my little sister back here.
Tim Curry was a very prolific voice actor of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, and has been in many cartoons and films such as Fern Gully, The Wild Thornberrys, and Rugrats, just to name a few. Though they have a similar cadence, it's hard to tell if this was the actual actor or if a voiceover artist was doing voice matching. In either case, Apollo's voice had been the most familiar to me among the group, and if I wanted to know exactly whose face was behind each character, I was gonna have to find a way to dig deeper. There had been so few articles on the works of Renaissance Atlantic, and even less coverage on the CEO Frank Ward. Even still, whispers of lost anime adaptations like StarStorm and Saban Moon echoed through retro anime communities everywhere. With the likes of Jim Cummings and Tim Curry possibly attached to this project, how was it that word of this adaptation never came to light? What was the true story behind this Guardians of the Cosmos pilot? These questions made me suddenly remember the Anime Land interview with Saint Seiya's creator, Masami Kuramada. He had mentioned viewing the pilot for StarStorm, but I wonder if he'd also been shown this early cartoon and what his thoughts were surrounding its inception. I felt like there was so much more here that needed to be unpacked. Luckily, unlike StarStorm and Saban Moon, the Guardians of the Cosmos pilot did have some saving grace. I was shocked to learn that the pilot had come complete with a full list of production credits that were displayed at the end of the episode. A list of over 44 different names that had a hand at the show's creation. With my new knowledge of the show's composers, possible actors involved, and a full production list, perhaps moving along in this investigation would be much easier than I initially thought. Listed amongst the animators, artists, and producers was the name of the studio house responsible for the episode in question. It turned out that the pilot episode Genesis had been produced by a studio under the name Fred Wolf Films. Oh, that actually explains a lot, but also doesn't. Discovering that Fred Wolf Films was behind the creation of this pilot episode left me with more questions than answers. I felt I had to get to the bottom of this, but before I could fully deconstruct these leads, it's imperative that we're all on the same page about Fred Wolf Films. It's important you're aware of exactly what Fred Wolf Films is and why this company is such a unique player in this investigation. This company was well known and highly regarded in the animation industry in the 80s, which makes the rejection of this lost pilot all the more intriguing. So if you have a moment, sit tight while I provide a brief history for further context. Frederick Wolf, also known by Fred Wolf, was an Academy Award-winning animator born on September 13, 1932 in Brooklyn, New York, USA. Throughout his career in the animation industry, Wolf produced and was involved in the creation of various well-known animated series such as Alvin and the Chipmunks, DuckTales, and the Flintstones. In 1967, Wolf founded the animation studio Fred Wolf Films in Hollywood, California with the help of Jimmy T. Murakami and later with Charles Swenson when they became a full partner in 1978. Jimmy Murakami, born June 5, 1933, was a Japanese-American-Irish, Academy Award-nominated animator and film director best known for his work on When the Wind Blows and The Snowman. Charles Swenson, born March 28, 1941, was an American animator, writer, producer, and director who worked in the industry for many years before joining Wolf. Fred Wolf Films worked with a number of companies and television networks, including the Walt Disney Company, Warner Brothers Studios, MGM, CBS, and ABC. The studio produced The Point, the first U.S. animated special to air on primetime television on ABC in 1971. They went on to produce an array of animated series such as Free to Be, You and Me, the Puff the Magic Dragon specials, Toxic Crusaders, James Bond Jr., and Sarah Ferguson's Budgie the Little Helicopter. Funnily enough, in 1993, the studio was also working on The New Adventures of Speed Racer, which was an Americanized version of the Japanese Speed Racer anime. With them having some experience at Americanizing anime properties in 1993, it's no wonder that they went on to work with Renaissance Atlantic to produce the Guardians of the Cosmos pilot. Their level of experience, in contrast to Toonmakers for example, shines through their quality of animation on the pilot episode alone. Among the many television series they worked on, perhaps the most well-known series Fred Wolf Films was responsible for producing was the hit 1987 animated series Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This was the characters' first appearance outside of their comics and helped launch the characters into mainstream popularity, becoming one of the most popular animated series in television history. Action figures, breakfast cereals, plush toys, and other merchandise featuring the characters appeared on the market during the late 1980s and early 1990s and became top sellers worldwide. By 1990, the series was being shown daily on more than 125 television stations. This makes it all the more surprising that even with all these extra efforts from a studio that was responsible for one of the most successful animated franchises of the 80s, still wasn't enough to bring Guardians of the Cosmos to life. This only left me with more questions and had me wondering what could have been if Guardians of the Cosmos had been released and ultimately reached the same level of success and cultural staying power as that of the Ninja Turtles. If things had rolled out differently, would it have been possible for the series to reach a level of popularity that hadn't been seen with the failed 2003 Deke dub? I was hoping that now, with a full list of employees, many of these questions would soon be laid to rest. Now that we've managed to do a rundown of the importance of Fred Wolf Films, I could finally start mapping out exactly what needed to be investigated, list all of my clues and contacts, and ultimately, what I'll be hoping to find. This was my comprehensive list on all of the avenues that needed to be explored. First, there's no better way to get an answer than by going to the direct source. I'm gonna attempt to reach out to and hopefully hear something back from Fred Wolf himself, and if possible, see if I can find any contact information on Jimmy Murakami or even Charles Swenson. With them being at the forefront of the company and having overseen the workflow of these animated projects, perhaps one of them would have some recollections of their partnership with Frank Ward and Renaissance Atlantic. Next, I plan to look more closely into the production team of Fred Wolf Films. I'd go through the long list of 40-something names, attempting to contact everyone from the production assistants, painters, producers, musicians, film editors, and storyboard artists. A lot of names that were listed were somewhat unfamiliar to me, but I hoped if anything, someone would be willing to sit down for an interview and would still have some memories of their time working at the studio. Lastly, I thought it would be worth identifying and reaching out to the voice actors that worked on this pilot episode. While I was able to identify Jim Cummings as having involvement in the series, I was still very much on the fence about my guess that Apollo was voiced by Tim Curry. Hopefully, if I was able to successfully link the right voiceover artists to their respective characters, maybe I'd be able to reach out to the cast and see if they remembered working on this this cancelled pilot. While sounding familiar, all of the voices would be impossible to pin down without some extra help, and thankfully, I knew exactly the person to turn to in order to learn more about the remaining faces behind these characters. If all my efforts in this investigation fell flat on its head, at least people would still be able to witness Guardians of the Cosmos in all of its glory. But being able to get a hold of someone would make for a serious breakthrough in learning more about what sort of shows Renaissance Atlantic had up their sleeve. And lucky for me, with all of the newfound leads to sort through, I felt I had a higher chance at potentially uncovering more secrets that had been hidden away from public eye. I was eager to venture further down this rabbit hole and was hopeful that someone on this list would be able to shed more light on this mystery. It was now time to dive into my thorough investigation on Guardians of the Cosmos. I started my investigation attempting to find the contact info of Fred Wolf and the former co-owners of the company, Jimmy Murakami and Charles Swenson. Unfortunately, Charles was well in his 80s and had much less of a digital footprint than Jimmy Murakami, and Jimmy had sadly passed away in February of 2014. That only left the, as of writing this, 90-year-old Fred Wolf, the original and current owner of the animation studio. I figured having already led such a long life in the industry, the likelihood of making contact with him would be quite slim. But oddly enough, upon doing a quick Google search, I came to discover that the Fred Wolf Films official website was still up and running. Though the website was still live, it seemed as though it hadn't been updated in some time. Even so, the main page displayed both a working phone number, fax number, and email address. I decided to first send over an email, and then realized it might be more efficient to just call their studio outright. The line was surprisingly still in service, but I was immediately directed straight to their voicemail and never actually had the chance to speak with anyone. I had called a few different times, all with the same outcome, and eventually I gave up. As long as they had my number on file and my email had gone through to the right people, I was satisfied enough with my attempts to move on to my next point of interest. Luckily, there was still a massive list of names I could sift through that could potentially take me further down my search. I made sure to investigate all of the names that had appeared at the end credits of the pilot episode. I looked up the names of executive producers, animators, storyboard artists, all in the hopes that I'd find a working phone number or email to inquire about this lost media. With over 40 names, I went into this search very hopeful and confident something would turn up, but I was surprised to discover that a handful of creatives on this list had sadly passed away, and like Jimmy, mostly had passed due to old age. I had to keep in mind that Fred Wolf Films was a close-knit family of animators and creatives, and that with the company having been founded so long ago, it was likely that many of the artists who worked on the production team were all now in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. In fact, a lot of the names I had investigated barely turned up any searches. After hours of research, out of the 44 names, I was only able to uncover the contact information of 8 individuals. Producer Walt Kubik, supervising director Billy Wolf, associate producer Andy Luckey, storyboard artist Dan Fawcett, prop designer Richard Ori, post-production supervisor Elliot Darrow, and production assistant Fred Salinas. While I waited to hear back from people on the production side of the project, I thought I'd begin my search on identifying the remaining voice actors that appeared in the lost pilot episode. Had I been accurate in my assumption that it was Tim Curry and Jim Cummings behind some of these characters? From listening to the pilot episode a few times, it was more than likely that Jim had actually voiced Tatsumi, Ram, and Quinn, but I still couldn't be sure of Tim Curry's involvement. If I was going to uncover the remaining characters, I needed to consult someone who had arguably much more knowledge on this subject, and luckily, I knew just the person who could help make more leeway on this. That same night, I wound up reaching out to Canadian content creator Phelan Porteous. Phelan has a review channel where he covers an array of topics from television media to movies to action figures, primarily focused on the early 80s and late 90s. Phelan's work had fallen onto my radar some years back, as he was well known for his popular review series where he'd often cover bad bootleg Disney-esque films and bargain bin type children's movies. More specifically, reviews on animated features from studios like Good Times Entertainment, Golden Films, and Dingo Pictures. With his broad scope of 80s and 90s knowledge, I figured he'd probably be able to identify a lot more voices than I could upon listening to the pilot himself. And just as I had hoped, he was able to give more insight on the possible identities of the remaining cast, as well as confirming some of my previous hunches as well. After sending him the audio, Phelan had this to say.
I can take a listen and see if I can pick out any of the voices for you. I'm not 100% on these, but Athena/Nova sounds like it could be Mona Marshall, and Seiya might be Corey Burton. It's bugging me too, because I know I've heard the voice of Shiro in something before, but it's not clicking who it is. I'll think about it some more and let you know if I figure anything more definite. All the Jim Cummings ones you have labeled are him for sure, though. I can usually pick his voice out. Oh, I'm pretty sure Shiro is Frank Welker. Oh, and yeah, if you do end up wanting some voiceover lines from me, that should be no problem. You know, like the ones I am speaking currently.
After convening with Phelan, I compared the voices to the actors in question, and sure enough, he had been right about Frank Welker and Corey Burton.
Well, I can see why a beautiful girl like you would want protection.
That's obvious, because it's a sweet ride.
She's in trouble. Apollo has her on Mount Olympus.
I get the feeling our jet judo needs a little more work.
He mentioned the possibility of Nova being voiced by actress Mona Marshall, but after re-listening to the pilot, I'm more inclined to believe that it might instead be the late voice actress Mary Kay Bergman.
I'm not gonna be able to step on this one.
You won't be laughing when Apollo begins his destruction.
Bergman and Mona actually share some career crossover, as she was the original voice of the character Sheila Brovlovsky in South Park, until she had sadly ended her life November of 1999, where the role was then passed down to Mona Marshall. There's also a strong possibility that Nova could in fact be voiced by Renee Jacobs, the original voice of April O'Neil in the 1987 Ninja Turtles series.
3 scientific equipment companies, 3 robberies.
And that's why he wants to take me back to Olympus.
Since much of the cast had also previously worked on the Ninja Turtles series, I looked through a handful of episodes and tried my best to match up the remaining voices, and as it turns out, from what I could hear, there's also a chance that actor Sam Clark, the voice of Leonardo, may have voiced Max in the pilot episode.
Now, April, would you like to tell us why those men were chasing you around the sewers?
You guys better drop my duffel bag before I drop you in your tracks.
As for unmasking the voice behind Jake, I sadly wasn't able to get very far, but he did sound strangely familiar.
I will miss you, but I won't miss living in this forsaken deep freeze in those Vadonia.
Weeks spent by with tons of silence. Sadly, the days were passing with no forward movement, and I was starting to accept the fact that this wasn't going to be a wall I'd be able to climb over. It felt a little disappointing to have stumbled onto such a long list of names, only to amount to so little progress. There was no word from any of the supposed voice actors, and nothing from the long list of Fred Wolf employees. I was pretty much ready to end the investigation here and post the pilot in full. It seemed that I wasn't going to get any closer to figuring out the origins of this unknown piece of lost media. And right as I was ready to wrap things up, I received a response from one of the contacts I had reached out to. I got an email from the associate producer, Andy Luckey. Of the few names I was able to find contact information on, only one person had reached out to discuss the lost Americanized pilot episode. By some sheer luck, out of the 44 names, the only person I successfully came into contact with was someone by the name of Andy Luckey. Andy Luckey, born October 7th, 1965, was an American animator, artist, and television producer. From 1989 to 1992, Luckey worked as a producer for Fred Wolf Films at both their studios in Burbank, California and Dublin, Ireland. During his time in the industry, he produced over 300 hours of programming and has most been recognized as being a popular producer on the 1980s animated series Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a show in which he earned 5 Emmy nominations for. Luckey also had some brief involvement in the video game industry as director and executive producer for Sir Richard Branson's Virgin Interactive, president and chief operating officer of Pure Interactive Entertainment, and as executive producer for the Crislin Company. His most popular work during this period was on the heavily praised and iconic video game version of Walt Disney's Aladdin, co-produced by Walt Disney Feature Animation and Virgin Interactive. When I had sent out my email, I had very little faith I would actually hear back from him. I was already feeling very defeated that my efforts hadn't led me very far, and so much time had gone by in between. Just as I was in the process of wrapping up my entire investigation, Andy had sent this response.
Hi Ray, I remember the series. I'll have to give you some thought as to if I remember enough to be of use to you. Perhaps we can chat later in the week as I'm a bit busy today. All the best, Andy.
Upon reading his email, I could hardly contain my excitement. I had been sitting in the dark for so long, and initially had very high hopes for this contact list I managed to uncover, but felt so let down once I had come to the realization that many of the 44 names were virtually inaccessible. Perhaps Andy was the lucky one of the bunch, and maybe he would hold the keys to learning more about Guardians of the Cosmos. It was all out of my hands, and all I could really do was hope for the best, sit back, and wait patiently for a response. Would Andy be the missing link? Or would my month-long search finally hit the end of the road? Before we can continue, I'd just like to take a moment to express my gratitude for all of your continued support on this ongoing series. Tales of the Lost is a series that's very near and dear to me. It's basically my baby and my main passion project. I get so much enjoyment out of making cinematic pieces on some of my favorite bits of nostalgic lost media, and being able to investigate and share my findings has brought a new sense of joy to my life. All I want to do right now is make entertaining content and produce my own series, and the reception to Tales of the Lost has been everything I could have asked for. And I'd love to continue doing this series for a very long time. But unfortunately, this passion project can come at a bit of a cost. This episode in particular was actually really expensive to make, and sadly, I was unable to find a sponsor for today's video. So if you'd like to help keep this series alive, just liking this video, commenting, and subscribing will help to push the video into the YouTube algorithm. The process of making an episode of Tales of the Lost is usually quite lengthy, where I spend almost 2 months investigating a piece of media, and then another month dedicated to writing, filming, and editing the whole video. So with no content being published in that time in between uploads, I lose my ranking in the YouTube algorithm, and by the time I post a new video, I decrease my chances of discovery by being away for so long. And your support could really go a long way in helping to keep this channel afloat, because with more likes and shares, the more the video will gain visibility, which can in turn draw in more and better sponsors. And if you'd like to take it a step further and support me monetarily, there are a few ways in which you can do that, whether it be tipping as a one-time payment, through super thanks once the video goes live, through my coffee, and even through Patreon. Donating as little as $1 over on Patreon can grant you special access to our community Discord server and other behind-the-scenes features that don't make it to the documentaries. To put this impact into perspective, if we got 2,000 viewers to donate $1 a month, that would be $2,000 that would help go towards better equipment, research, Library of Congress documents, subtitles, and other necessary fees that go into making these hour-long deep dives, and that amount of support would honestly be life-changing. Thank you for following me on this journey, and thank you so much for your continued love and support. This series means a lot to me, and I want to continue making high-quality and entertaining episodes that people can really sit back with and enjoy. With that being said, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the remainder of this program. I was so eager to hear exactly what Andy would have to share about his time working on Guardians of the Cosmos. Out of all the investigating I had done, he had been the only person to have reached out, and my feelings of anxiety were skyrocketing at the possibility of him being able to provide more information on this pilot's existence. But that anticipation was short-lived, and those feelings very quickly came to a screeching halt. I did wind up hearing back from Andy, but it wasn't quite the response I had expected. Some days later, I woke up to find a singular, straight-to-the-point message sitting in my inbox.
Hi Ray, I've reflected a bit on the series you mentioned. While I have vague memories of discussions on the show, 30 years has taken its toll. I simply can't remember enough to be of use. Thanks nonetheless for your inquiry, Andy.
I couldn't believe it. I had finally hit that dead end. I was thankful Andy even responded in the first place, and to no fault of his own, if he honestly had foggy memories and couldn't remember enough, then there wasn't much I could really do. And as hard of a pill it was to swallow that my investigation had led me to a dead end, I could at least call it in knowing that I had made some attempt at making sense of this estranged piece of media that found its way out of the Library of Congress archives. At least I could throw in the towel, knowing that I gave it my all. With all of the attempts made to localize Saint Seiya for North American English-speaking audiences, it never quite had that same staying power and profound impact as it did in both Japan and Spanish-speaking countries. Truly, its impact was much larger than that and actually reached a global scale, and managed to target most parts of the world, aside from the one country with arguably the largest economy in the world and the biggest chokehold on mainstream pop culture. In many ways, our country failed you, Saint Seiya, and you you never quite received that recognition here that you so sorely deserved. But I wonder if that could have all changed if Renaissance Atlantic had truly capitalized on the trickle-down success of the Ninja Turtles and were given the okay to release their Americanized incarnation of the Japanese anime. It was actually a pretty solid animation, and you have to bear in mind it was, after all, just a pilot. And with the project being spearheaded by Fred Wolf Films, I'd imagine if picked up for syndication, the quality would have been on par with other children's shows they had been working on at the time. It's very perplexing to think about all of these opportunities and to assume that in some alternate universe, Guardians of the Cosmos could have reached a level of success that would have surpassed that of the ADV and Deke dubs of Saint Seiya. And ultimately, I'd like to know if I'm alone in scratching my head about this. So there's one last thing that I need to do. I'm gonna let you guys judge for yourselves, as I'm curious to what your thoughts are on this pilot. Perhaps sharing this video will bring forth some unanswered questions of my own, and maybe with the help of viewers, we can finally identify the remaining voice cast and put my concerns to rest on whether or not Apollo is in fact voiced by Tim Curry. I really hope you found some entertainment in my excavation onto this subject, and although I wasn't able to get all the answers I was hoping, perhaps like last time, something else will spring forth and surprise me when I least expect it. But until then, please enjoy the full animated pilot episode of Guardians of the Cosmos, known as Genesis.
Master? I am fine. Only you are now the master. Chain of Andromeda.
You know it's dangerous walking the streets after dark. You might run into some unsavory types with a gun or a knife.
Take my money, just don't hurt us.
Whoa! Yeah, let's get out of here, man.
You're safe now.
Nice moves, Queen. Like the phoenix rising out of the fire. Your skills will take you far from here.
mastered the meteor of Pegasus and can punch 100 times per second. With fists like yours, you will have no trouble making ruins of your opponents.
These 5 are good. It's too bad they have studied so hard, only to be destroyed.
I can teach you no more, Clint. The student has surpassed his teacher. The time has come for you to meet Nova, your benefactor, the one who has paid so that you could learn these skills.
I've often wondered who was paying for my training, and why. Guess I'm about to find out.
I do not like being told what to do and when to do it. When I'm face to face with this Mr. Nova dude, I'm gonna tell him where he can go.
Channel your anger at your enemies, Quinn, not those who want to help. You've been given a great gift. Use it wisely.
You've been like a father to me, Master. I will miss you, but I won't miss living in this forsaken deep freeze in those Vadonia.
I wish you could come with me. My skills will be in your hands, my love in your heart.
Bye.
Zack, someone has gone to a lot of time and trouble to train you. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that you will soon be facing great danger.
Danger is just a game for those who are well trained.
Good. They'll all be arriving at the same time and will lead me right to my target. I'll have to send them a welcoming committee.
Excuse me, I believe this is mine.
Nice try, geek. Go scam someone else's luggage.
If I didn't need my clothes and gear, I'd cram this bag down your throat. You guys better drop my duffel bag before I drop you in your tracks.
Really? Hey, that's mine!
What are you clowns doing with my duffel?
Jake?
That's mine. Who is Clint?
Me. Well, I got Zack's.
Quinn?
Yeah, Quinn. Here, this one's Max's.
What the heck's going on here?
Maybe we've all been drafted onto the same hockey team.
No! We've all been trained by the same benefactor.
Why?
The sooner we find Mr. Nova, the sooner we'll find out.
I know you guys are from out of town, so let me just fill you in on how to survive here, okay? See, all you gotta do is be sure to give big tips. That, of course, starts with yours truly. Ugh, it's a good thing I didn't get a manicure this week. I'll be right back. You stupid blind bat! Can't you even see a yellow car? What do I gotta do? Paint it pink with purple polka dots?
What's taking so long?
Sorry about the little accident, gentlemen.
They're blocking the doors. Hang on.
What do you say we teach those road hogs a lesson?
You'll have to excuse us, but we're new in this city.
Yeah, we only just learned that in order to survive, you gotta give good tips.
That's right. So if you guys want to survive, we suggest you take a tip from us.
Like, get lost.
Run him down! No, not my... Chain of Andromeda! we'll keep them cool until the heat shows up.
Those foolish bikers were supposed to follow them, not fight with them. Next time I won't send humans to do my dirty work.
This is it! We're looking for a Mr. Nova?
Just go inside. You'll find what you're looking for.
Wow! You could buy my neighborhood for the cost of cleaning this joint.
Guests have arrived, Nova.
You're the one who paid for our training?
Look, if it's not too much trouble, we'd kind of like to know why.
Please sit down, and I'll explain. What you are about to hear may come as a shock. I had you trained so that you could protect me.
What's shocking about that? Well, I can see why a beautiful girl like you would want protection.
Well, if it was just me, one of you would be enough. But I also need you to protect the Earth.
What's the matter, babe? Superman quit on you?
How dare you speak to Athena like that?
Athena? I thought her name was Nova.
On Mount Olympus, she's Athena, sister of Apollo. Here on Earth, she's known as Nova.
Oh, and I suppose that the Mount Olympus is really CIA headquarters?
Perhaps I can convince you. Follow me.
Ooh, a trap door, huh?
Mount Olympus, and those are the castles that defend the fortress of my brother, Apollo. My brother is enraged at the people of Earth for ruining the planet, and intends to use his 12 golden warriors to destroy everyone and start over. The only thing that's kept him from doing it is that I'm still here. And that's why he wants to take me back to Olympus.
Back to the loony bin.
I'm sorry. Really?
You won't be laughing when Apollo begins his destruction.
What's that?
Special armor. It would have given you invincible power. But you're obviously not ready.
Look, Nova, or whatever your name is, you don't need bodyguards.
Yeah, you need a ringmaster. This place is a circus.
Come on, let's go. Hold it, guys. All we had were plane tickets and cab fare. Where will we go?
We'll sleep in the park.
You can stay here tonight. I'll arrange your return flights in the morning.
I'll show you to your rooms.
Look, I'm sorry about the way the others acted. If you really think you're in danger, Nova, maybe I can stick around. After all, danger...
It's just a game for those who are well-trained.
How did you...
Hush. We of Olympus have very sensitive hearing. Of all the young men in the world, I chose 5 with enough physical skill to stop an army. But without enough character to help an old woman across the street. I'll have to start all over again, Aegis.
Try to get some sleep, miss. Perhaps things will be better in the morning.
Those fools have led me straight to Athena. Ram, go down to the Earth and bring my little sister back here.
As you command, Apollo.
We'll see if Athena can save her precious planet now.
heard a scream.
Yeah, it came from the girls' room.
Greetings, humans. Say goodbye to your benefactor.
Actually, we came to say goodbye to you.
Chain of Andromeda.
No, don't take him out alone. Only together can you...
Oh, maybe you'd like to fly like a warrior.
Diamond dust! That ought to chill him out.
On the contrary, it's only made me hotter. Next,
Rising Dragon.
Fist of fire! Not even gold can withstand that kind of heat. Yes, again.
Stand back. Meteor of Pegasus! Are you all right?
I think so.
We've got to help her.
Zack!
Nova? I must be dreaming.
No, I'm projecting my thoughts into your mind. You must help me, not for my own sake, but for the Earth.
But where are you, Nova?
Oh, fine. Now he's talking to himself.
Yeah, that battle with the gold guy must have shaken his brain loose.
I'm on Mount Olympus in Apollo's castle. Come quickly. And remember, only by working together can you succeed.
Wait! How do we get to Olympus? Nova? Nova? Oh, she's gone. I didn't know she was here. She's in trouble. Apollo has her on Mount Olympus. We've got to get her.
Mount Olympus? Excuse me? This is too weird, man. I'm out of here.
Quinn, wait. Trust me. Just this once.
Okay, Zack, we trust you. Take us to Mount Olympus.
I can't.
Well, I can. But there isn't much time. Follow me. This portal leads directly to Mount Olympus.
Let's go.
Wait. Mount Olympus is filled with deadly threats.
Hey, let's take the special armor Athena showed us.
It's gone. That's too bad. If Apollo is as powerful as they say, it would have come in handy against him.
If your hearts and minds are clear, and of a single goal, you will have all the help you need. Good luck.
Made it.
Great. Now how do we find the girl?
I can feel her life force. That way, come on.
You young mortals are brave, but foolish.
Don't judge them too quickly, Apollo, or you're the one who may be judged the fool.
Yes, we'll see how well they do, little sister, when they come face to face with what I've got waiting for them.
How will we get across? No problem. I'll just freeze it and we can walk.
have a chance. Their puny powers are no match for mine. Defrost anything you can freeze.
Not if we can help it.
You'll never stop me.
Quinn, we need some heat. You got it. Fist of fire.
No! You underestimated them, brother dear. They'll be here any minute.
Shall be waiting for them.
Nova is in there. I can feel it.
Yes, but you won't live to see her again.
Looks like you have overestimated your young heroes, Nova, my dear. I'm glad you could be here to witness their demise.
Run like rats.
Not a chance. What do we do now, Zack? I've got an idea, but we've got to hurry.
They're gone! I knew it! Tell me how you destroyed them. I want to hear every detail.
It was simple, Apollo. They fought as individuals instead of together. I defeated them one by one. I have a message for Athena from the one called Zack, uttered with his dying breath.
Sent his regrets, did he?
No.
He sent us!
No! I'll destroy your puny world. Apollo will not be defeated!
We're back!
And we're hot! You've lived up to my expectations. But don't let it go to your heads. Apollo will be back with a vengeance.
Well, we'll be ready for it. And I think I speak for all of us when I say that we would be honored, Nova, to be your guardians of the cosmos.
Cloak while you still can, but you won't be laughing when my golden warriors return for Athena and destroy you and your inferior world.
You can try, Apollo, but we'll be waiting for you.
though I didn't quite get the answers I was looking for, in my investigation I still managed to come out with a small handful of new finds. Identifying some of the voiceover artists and learning about how Guardians of the Cosmos differed from Saint Seiya was still enough information to be put towards learning more about the secondary filled Renaissance Atlantic spin-off, StarStorm. That door was still somewhat open, and when my investigation into Fred Wolf and Guardians of the Cosmos concluded, I couldn't help but think I still needed to push deeper. I wanted to keep chasing StarStorm, and after learning about the animated pilot that had been made just a year before, I was convinced that the two were related. I still held on to the theory that perhaps some of the changes that were added to Guardians of the Cosmos were also recycled into StarStorm, in the same way the Deke dub of Sailor Moon had retained character names and elements from the Americanized Saban Moon pilot. This wouldn't be a huge stretch, especially considering that Deke went on to produce the first English dub of Saint Seiya in 2003. These thoughts continued to linger in my head, and eventually my mind wandered back to my correspondence with Frank Ward, the person responsible for all of this. When I had unknowingly withdrawn the Guardians of the Cosmos pilot, the contents of the envelope had contained a separate sheet with a complete story summary of the series, listing a few names of some individuals involved in the project. I knew the StarStorm tape had also been deposited to the archives, and just like Guardians of the Cosmos, there was a high chance that the tape would come with some sort of written description about the pilot, which could also reveal even more leads that have yet to be explored. The StarStorm submission had to have had its own separate description of contents, so if I could get in touch with Frank Ward, I could potentially be killing two birds with one stone, get the true origin story behind Guardians of the Cosmos, and gain access to the remaining files on StarStorm hidden inside the Library of Congress. My only interactions with Frank Ward up until that point was through the help of a third party. When I had drafted up our contract, we both had to sign our names along with our contact information, and still being in possession of our contracts, I figured, what harm would there be in reaching out? There had been a lot of dead air between us since crossing paths. I wasn't even sure if he'd seen the Saban Moon documentary and wondered what sort of reaction he'd have knowing I stumbled upon another new find. With Frank Ward being an older and reclusive figure, there was a strong chance that I wouldn't hear back from him at all. But if there was a chance at potentially solving this mystery for good and attaining the full StarStorm pilot once and for all, I was willing to reach out and wait as long as it took to get a response. And if you'd like to know whether or not this persistence truly paid off, you're just gonna have to wait until the next episode.